Welcome to Invest in Women, the podcast series, your insight into the growing wealth of women and the issues that impact their business and yours. See what happens when you educate, empower, and invest in women.
Let's face it, retirement planning can be confusing. At Jackson, we're working to make retirement clear for everyone, starting with you. Our easy-to-understand resources and user-friendly digital tools help simplify your entire experience. You can have confidence in your retirement with clarity from Jackson. Seek the clarity you deserve at jackson.com. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York. Patricia Lizarraga joins us on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
She is with Hypatia Capital Management, and we were off air just starting to talk about the ETFs that they introduced, a year ago? And so let's just start with that and how it's geared toward women and women specific.
Sure. So the Hypatia Women's CEO and ETF, what it does, its ticker symbol is WCEO, and that's exactly what it does. It invests in American public companies that have a female CEO. And why do we invest in women CEOs? For one, performance, two, diversification, and three, impact.
Well, and statistically, there's really still lower numbers of women who are CEOs of these companies. Is that correct? I mean, I love the reason I love this so much because it's giving support to the women who have made it there thus far and maybe inspiring women to try to get to that level in their own companies.
Yep, the S&P 500 has less than 8% women CEOs. The WCEO ETF has 100% women CEOs.
Well, I have a young son who, as he gets older, he's 9 now, and the struggle to get him to, understand inclusivity 100% gets harder because the world is starting to teach him that what I'm telling him is not necessarily what he sees reflected in the world, right? So when it comes to women empowerment, he's all about it, but yet sometimes he's like, well, but only boys do this and only boys tend to do that. I'm like, well, not necessarily. And so it just seems that, I don't understand how in 2024 we still are perpetuating this idea that women can't make it to that level or aren't encouraged to make it to that level, or girls just don't seem, it's getting much better. But I would love for them to see, look, an equal thing where boys can be, the bosses and girls can be bosses, and there's nothing wrong with either scenario.
You're absolutely right. That is exactly the impact of the WCEO. If you use generative AI and ask them about CEOs, it'll automatically show you men, because that's what pattern matching is. It's accepting that what you usually see is what you should see. And what we're saying is that no, in fact, what we need to do is really highlight these 130 so women that are CEOs of American public companies and show their performance so that people can start to think that it's normal for women to be CEOs, not just your son, but also board members, right? So boards are still primarily male. There's about 30% female right now, but it's really important to de-risk the idea that picking a female CEO is risky.
Yeah.
So the impact of the WCO is twofold in that way. Is one, to show those faces, to show that there's quite a few and that they're very successful, and B is to highlight the performance. If you can see it, you can be it.
Yes.
If you've heard that saying, if you can see it, you can be it.
But I just love what you said. The things that you usually see aren't necessarily the things that you should see. I just love that. The fact that what has been isn't what has to be, right? And so I just adore that. Now, let's talk about you. You're in this position where you're able to offer this and to talk about this. What is your background? How did you get here? What inspired you to get into this industry?
Sure. So I was inspired in college by a professor I had, a man named David Swenson, who's very famous in the endowment world. And he taught actually a survey class when I was in college. So I took a class, as typical co-ed. I sat in the front row and practically wrote hearts on my, on my eyes because he was so funny and so smart. And we just wanted him to know that we thought he is so engaging. And so that he suggested to read the Wall Street Journal every day and see if you're interested in what it's talking about. And I became fascinated with the world of finance. I went into investment banking right after college and after business school. And once I made managing director, I realized this would be more fun if I had a more balanced life in terms of having female clients and in terms of having female colleagues, in terms of having female investors. And I was thinking about it, and all of a sudden I had my first female CEO client. And I was so, so impressed by how great she was on so many levels that I thought my aha moment was, wow, I want to find more clients like her. And
Oh, I
that
love
took
it.
me on a road to thinking about investing in women in leadership and reading all the research that was already being done 15 years ago about the outperformance of women in leadership. And that took me to the road I traveled until it became clear to me that I thought every woman in the United States and every person in the United States should have the opportunity to be able to invest in women if they so choose.
Mm-hmm.
And that opportunity didn't exist because
Mm-hmm.
right now, most of the vehicles that are available to invest in women in leadership have to do with early stage investing. And I am an early stage investor. I am invested in a number of those funds, but they're only for the wealthy.
Right.
What about a woman who has a retirement account that is right now 97% male led, and she has those funds and she wants to make a difference with them? Shouldn't there be an opportunity for her as well, or for him as well? And that led us to try to create a product. Now, the product that we tried to create, we do have an investment thesis. And our investment thesis is that women CEOs will outperform.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, why will they outperform? And our investment thesis is that women will outperform because it's harder for women to become CEOs.
Mm.
And McKinsey says this, BlackRock says that. So the ones that do make it to CEO are by definition better than the people that didn't have to go through those extra hoops to make it to CEO.
Absolutely.
And numbers wise, those are men. Men are great as well. It's just that the women who actually make it to CEO have to have something extra. So that's our investment thesis. And the question is that women will outperform. But then the question is, how do you isolate that female factor? How do you make it that the investment is about women and not about something else? And that's where we worked with our advisors, including Wilshire Associates, which is our index calculator, to figure out an algorithm that would really isolate the female factor. And what we did is we eliminated industry and size as a factor, right? Because as you can imagine, there's more women CEOs that are CEOs of healthcare and of consumer discretionary. So if we didn't take away that factor, then it would be a consumer discretionary / healthcare fund. So we had to eliminate the factor, which we did by matching the industry to an index. And second of all, we had to eliminate the size factor. For example, in the S&P 500, you do not find a woman CEO until company number 27, size-wise.
Really?
Yeah. And that is a fabulous company called AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, led by Lisa Su. It's a wonderful performer, kind of second to NVIDIA in that chip space. So you have to go to company 27 before you find a female CEO. So if you don't normalize it for size, then you would be making it not about women. So we made it equally weighted. So we created an algorithm where we took out industry and we took out size as a factor. And we did other tests to find other influences. But what we found is if you took out those two factors, it was really about the stock picking of the women. It was really about picking the women CEOs. So that's what we did. And that's how we created the product, where we set out to prove our investment thesis that women CEOs will outperform their benchmark.
WCEO, right, is the symbol. I mean,
Yep.
I have it, I have it written down, highlighted.
Yeah. So then go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to say that, off air, we talked about you attending the Invest in Women conference, Financial Advisor Magazine's Invest in Women conference. And I was, that's a room full of women who speak the same language. You're in the same profession. And sometimes I think for a lot of people in any profession, it's tough to get in a room that's just about women. And, so I wanted
Sure.
you to describe what you thought about being there and the importance of, women advisors networking with each other.
Well, first of all, it was an incredible experience to be in that room, in those rooms with hundreds of women advisors and women advisors who are really trying to do the very best for their clients. I think you can't open up a newspaper about wealth management and retirement planning without getting that in your face that there is a great wealth transfer going on, right? By 2030, women are going to control 2/3 personal investment in the United States. And that is creating a sea change of the financial industry trying to understand how to service women investors. And I was so struck with how diligent these women were. One, because obviously they're business women, they want more clients. But two, I think that women are socialized to be empathetic and to really think about who they're talking to, what that person's feeling, and how to help them. We're helpers. So in many ways. So I think that I was just so energized by the hundreds of women trying to figure out, how can I use my whole person and background to help my clients and help my business? And that's what I loved about it the most, is that it's so 360, so holistic, the way women are trying to understand the sea change in the financials, in the wealth management and retirement planning industry. So that's was important to me, because I need to get to know the female advisor.
Right.
And I need to understand how I can help her clients. Right? And that's what I went to learn. How do female advisors approach helping their clients? And from that point of view, the research tells us that women care about what they're investing in.
Yeah.
And so research also tells us that women clients want to have a substantive conversation that has to do with, yes, how these investments are going to allow them to live the future they want, but also what they're investing in and why, both from a returns and a risk perspective, as well as from a what is my money going into perspective. So that is what I learned. What I'm trying to bring to the table is an opportunity to talk to your clients about something they care about. And why should they care about it if they don't know about it? Because it turns out that the WCEO ETF, because we invest in all the women, we have the data.
Yeah.
So now I can tell you that this is a fact. Women CEOs promote women to their leadership teams 80% more than men do.
80%. I just want to read 80%. The fact that
80
don't consider that. And and again, it's not putting men in a bad light, but it's like, what has conditioned them to not even consider that, right? That's something that you'd have to dig deep for.
Yeah. And I don't want to scare off the guys, because women CEOs, senior leadership teams are still 65% men.
Mm-hmm.
But that's compared to 80% of the guys. Their leadership teams are only 20% women. So if you have a sister, if you have a daughter, if you yourself are still in the workforce, the research, the facts will tell you that the more women in leadership that there are, the more likely you are to get promoted. So the direct link between the WCEO and the women you love is we need more women in leadership to even the playing field.
Mm-hmm. And I like how you said even the playing field, because I would assume that when you talk about those balanced boardrooms,
Mm-hmm.
to me, you need both genders in a balance to really make the right decisions, because there's value in everybody. And to have it lopsided one way or the other is not going to get you the best decisions. And I think that it's exciting. It makes me, Patricia, it makes me think of like our grandmothers would be so excited to hear about the you mentioned the 2/3, by what year was it that women are going to,
By 2030, women are going to control 2/3, right, of the assets. But the only, as far as we know, and we study this carefully, the only investment vehicle available widely in the market to invest in women is the WCO ETF. There are other gender lens ETFs, and we love them, and they're large cap allocations. But the only one that invests in women CEOs is a WCO ETF. And so we were so appreciative of FA because we need to get the word out. Because
Right.
it is, as you know, it's only the independent registered investment advisors that can show this to their clients. Because if you're on one of the big platforms, right,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to show it if it's not on the recommended list.
Right.
And that takes us to a whole nother issue is what are they saying about the WCO ETF? Now, obviously, Hypatia, we've been around for 10 years. We have a lot of very senior women in our network. So when I reach out to them and say, have you invested? I often get the answer. I've had to open up a Schwab account or a Fidelity account to invest because my broker, my advisor will not do this. It's not on their recommended list.
Wow.
And
Even
so
though
I
the
say,
client is asking, even though the client is asking for it.
right. So they recommend against it. And
Wow.
so I asked them why. Why are they recommended? And there's three reasons. The first one is they say it's too small. It only has X million dollars under management. And that's where we start with the myth of illiquidity, because ETFs whose underlying securities are liquid publicly traded stocks do not have illiquidity, no matter how small they are. And we have Citadel as our main market maker, but there's 8 other people jumping in there if the NAV, the net asset value, is not reflecting accurately.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole ETF could be unwound without a problem in an hour if it had to do. The myth of illiquidity is just a myth. ETFs are liquid, but this is what advisors tell their clients.
Yeah.
The second thing they tell them is it's expensive, and it's not expensive according to Morningstar. That's also a myth. Why? Because some people are confusing active and passive ETFs.
Okay.
We are not a passive ETF. We are an active ETF. We are a very active ETF. And there is nothing passive about investing in women CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing passive at all. So, in fact, when you look at the Morningstar comparing us to our peers, we are in the second cheapest category you can get for a small cap allocation.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, the WCO ETF is very cheap for what it does.
So it's compare apples to apples, basically, where people are trying to, again, I'm
Right.
shocked, and I'll continue, because you said there was another myth, but I'm still shocked that as a client with certain brokers, I can't have what I want. That's not,
Most advisors can most advisors can take an unsolicited trade, right? You can tell them, you're advising me not to do this. I want to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously they don't feel that's their job.
Right. Right. True.
I've had
True.
too many instances where a good friend will come back to, very senior executive women, and they're like, I had to finally just go and open my own account. My advisor was giving me a hard time. So the myth of illiquidity, the myth of it being expensive, and the third myth is that it doesn't have a track record, right? Well, we already have a year-long track record, but the database of women CEOs did not exist. But we went back and built it, and we now have over 6 years of data. It's not the same as the ETF. It's the WCEO index published by Wilshire, where there's 6 years of data that show over 140 basis points of outperformance per annum to its index. Right.
Well, yeah. And that what a valuable resource that is, because that, there hasn't been a lot of research into that, right? I mean, you're spearheading this, like, hey, look, we have information that you could not find before. Like, you've become a resource for a lot of people.
And BlackRock did a big study, which they published in November of 2023, that measured the performance of companies with women CEOs, or more companies in leadership, or more companies on the board, more women on the board of companies. And they found even more outperformance than we have, but it's not tradable. The only opportunity to trade that data is the WCEO ETF, as far as we know.
Fascinating. Patricia, I could talk to you all day about this.
Yes.
Now, we do have to wrap up, but please continue with whatever, we have not covered yet, but, and also please let people know if they want more information, or if they want to reach out to you, or if they will reach out to the company, how they can do so.
Sure. So we have, there's a lot of information on our website, WCEOETF.com, and my personal email is on that website, and I am very happy to answer any question about this, whether it's the investor directly, or if they want me to talk to their advisors. I'm happy to do so, to get them comfortable with the fact that A, it's quite liquid, B, quite liquid without sacrificing price. I should clarify. B, it is cheap compared to other active small cap allocations. And 3, there is significant data both by Hypatia and BlackRock and Credit Suisse and many others, McKinsey, showing the outperformance of women. And it's really important. What I'm telling my friends is it's really important for each of you to go and open that extra trading account and put some money in, so that this can get enough assets to get on the platforms and get the advisors more educated, right? Because it's that chicken and the egg situation that is that's causing us that's the hardest thing for us. And Wall Street is a show me the money kind of a place.
Yeah.
If Wall Street does not see women investing in women, then they don't think it's important.
Right. Well, we know that. Well, we know they don't think.
Money.
Yeah, we know that they already don't think it's important, right? This is a little bit of an uphill battle, because again, and I'm not putting words in your mouth. This is me talking, Melissa, but from my observation, we mentioned earlier about how men don't automatically consider women. So the idea of it is automatically against what they know. So it's, so to me, I could see where there's an added prejudice there, latent, that they were like, oh, are you sure that, because this doesn't really sound like something that would be lucrative. But here we are talking about this and encouraging women to, hey, it is something that is worth the investment.
It is. And we are now thinking about launching a campaign called the 2% Club. Now, everybody's heard about the 2%, or many people have heard about the 2% that women VCs, women entrepreneurs are receiving from the VC community, right?
Yeah.
So what we're saying is, okay, 2% to VC, but also put 2% of your portfolio into the WCEO ETF. And how did we come up with that 2%? Well, first of all, one technical detail we did not discuss yet is that the WCEO sits in the small cap allocation of one's portfolio because it's equally weighted. So that makes the size of the companies seem like they're smaller, even though we have small, medium, and large. And so we think that that's a proper allocation in small cap. And the second reason is because it turns out that women are about 7% of the S&P 500 CEOs, but only represent 5% of the allocation. So that in order to top it up with that 2%, you can get to at least giving them as much money as they represent from a person perspective.
Right. I mean, Patricia, again, I encourage everybody, WCEOETF.com, correct? More information. And like you said, your information's on there too. If you're an advisor, you can talk to her about that perspective. If you're a woman who is listening to the podcast because you want to learn more about money and you want to ask about investing and talking to your broker, then Patricia's there for you as well. Do I have that correct? Because I know you offered that earlier. Patricia, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. It's really has been inspiring because it's nice to hear of something that is helping women who are leaders and how we can help each other in more ways than what we already know.
Thank you. I very much enjoyed it. And I love speaking about this because I feel passionate about it. I feel as women, the more we invest in women, the more that we will gain from all the investments that collectively we make. And that's what's going to change things. Right. Women have the power. We've seen it. We've seen it with Taylor Swift. We've seen it with Caitlin Clark. We've seen it with Beyonce. And we've seen it with the Barbie movie. So we've seen it change trends and change the system. And all we have to do is put 2% of our portfolio into investing directly in women CEOs, and we will see a sea change.
Yeah.
It will change Wall Street. That 2% can change Wall Street.
I love it. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Invest in Women, the podcast series. Your insight into the growing wealth of women and how to attract and retain your female clients and help scale your practice. Learn more by subscribing to this podcast or visiting fa-mag.com.